These slides are in the document for this session. So I'm going to go through very quickly so that you have a reference within your group. This is meant to be interactive, so I'm going to keep this super short so you have context. And then it will be break out to use some of this information to work on markets or sub-markets as we just talked about in the opening session, and then to share the ones that you're interested in or Q&As about those markets. And the ones with the little sun star are the ones I'm going to slow down on, otherwise I'm going to breeze through really quickly. So from relevant points this morning, we heard that picking sub-markets is a way to get a deep understanding about the problem for the customer. They're these very broad markets, but as the conversation in the beginning said, hey, finding something that's small, and it might be small in terms of the amount of data in the beginning, but if you hit product market fit, you can then scale it out. He also introduced the idea that the go-to-market also defines the nature of the market that you might want to pick. If it's a form factor, a way to talk to customers or reach customers is not like amenable or it's too slow, that's a factor. And so one of the things for this is to help organize for speed. Try to develop as much information, get high conviction, focus, and then we plan actions, and then we discover about that market. We either talk to them, and then we find that they like it, or we pivot and we realize, okay, that wasn't as a great hypothesis, and then we rinse and repeat. And the goals to make things fast are to frame it as, what can we get for 2026 revenue? He also talked about there's this way to not have fragmentation, so we want to have a shared foundation, and I'll introduce some of that so that we can get leverage. So making sure everyone is aligned. If you have a market or you look at some of our markets, what's the shared foundation that we can all leverage? And then he talked about, AI is we can put that layer in, and I'll explain if we have time, as the customer. Like that's the framing for some of these things. So this is defining markets. Similar idea, market, product fit, but in putting the market first. Picking a market that's small doesn't mean that that's the end all be all. So I think some of you, when you see these numbers, might think, oh, that's too small. You can start small, it gets bigger, it introduces you to other adjacent markets, and then it gets bigger. But the key is to start. So the goal is for us to start to get the framework so that we can pick markets based on differentiators so that we can actually have revenue in 2026. And so there are multiple markets. I'm going to have hypotheses on some markets that I've spent time in based on talking to customers or research. I look at them based on what are differentiators, what is it that they would want to choose us, but what's the bare minimum that we need to be credible to those users as this shared foundation. So the foundation is a more technical version of this Friday, basically how to make it work. There's more technical definitions of what that shared foundation is. If you want to be involved with that, that talk is on Friday. So differentiators. We heard some of those differentiators from the talks. And some customers have expressed these types of things, but we have to land it on why they care and how Filecoin wins. So these are some things that you've either heard from customers or we're inferring from customer behavior or trends. These are things that we can see as differentiators, particularly against existing hyperscalers, competitors, and we want to start to play into those because those markets allow us to be pulled into the market and more importantly, to win if they compare us against what their competitive set is. So, for example, a potential, which is also part of this conversation, could be, well, what is something that maybe we don't have, we could enter, and it does open up these markets. So one that I'll talk about in more detail is data sovereignty, particularly for non-US companies, and then why they care in terms of a compliance concern and the Cloud Act. I'm going to breeze through this. I'm going to use it as an example, but this is a template to use if you're like, oh, I have another idea for a market or I want to refine it. And then the bottoms-up estimate, you'll see versus just Googling or ChatGPTing what's the size of this market. Like almost all these markets, they will say it's in the billions. But I'm using a bottoms-up, which is how do we think about what's the estimated size, what's the number of customers we can reach, what's a reasonable expectation of the amount of data that we can get, and to work through that. And so that is a little bit different, and the numbers by nature are small because we're trying to get what makes sense to have the highest ROI in 2026. So I'm going to start with a broad segment of whom we've been working with today and what we've been learning about them and how we're refining that market for Filecoin on-chain cloud, which is working with Web3 builders. So I'm going to slow down here and talk about an example of how we've gathered data from talking to them and find that use case and how we're landing, oh, okay, maybe it's small, but what are the benefits and advantages? So the use case is DeFi protocols, and they have front ends. Some of them are using IPFS, but it's centralized. Some of them are using centralized websites. And we can kind of think through, okay, what might be the advantage? Well, they do want, because of their the nature that they are decentralized, the DAOs, a percentage of them do want a decentralized infrastructure, and they want to pay with their native token. So this gives us some leverage against other alternatives. And then I thought, okay, well, how many of them are actually meaningful in size? So 150, and then I said, okay, what's the size of the front end, so a small front end? And then what could be the potential price based on what they might be paying currently? And then sort of estimating of that total number, maybe we can get 50, and then how much will they pay? And then maybe by end of the year, that might be 12,000. So as you can see, there's some guesses and estimates here, but I'm trying to work through what's realistic. We can't get all 150, and maybe we have to go with things that are smaller, but will they be that interested, or will it matter to them? But you can see I'm kind of like thinking through, okay, this market isn't maybe particularly large, but at least I can land something. I think, okay, based on what we already have, we probably could sell to them if we met those needs. Like there's not anything really new that we would need to build. A similar exercise with Web3 object storage, but the gamut is much broader. So I've talked to some that were on audio. I talked to some that were just files and images. I talked to some that were in video. In video, I started to land on as like, okay, the size is bigger, but did they really care about it being Web3? Did they care about sovereignty? And turns out there's a subset of that market that are based out of the United States that are like, oh, I think I want it to be outside the United States. So I shrunk what their big estimate was, which was in the petabytes, and said, okay, but you're a startup, I'm going to shrink what I think you can get to, in the hundreds of terabytes, but let me think through, okay, if those happen, this might be what that market could be for 2026. So now I'm going to slow down and talk about one that I spent more time on, and then we're going to split it over to you guys. So here is a market where they have regulatory requirements. I've heard through a proxy that already works with them that they have these issues up front. And so it's not a Web3 market, it's a Web2, but many of those things could meet our needs. And so I looked at the size of the market, how many are there, and then I worked through an exercise, which we're not going to spend time on this right now. Okay, we probably only going to get a smaller subset of them. I cut the number really by not the big asset managers, which would have a lot more data, and so I think we're probably going to be easier to get to the smaller ones, but at least I can find their contact names. I can find the list of what they have, and then target them that way. A third market that we've explored, and that's an opportunity for us to, after having spent time with one of them, for example, is DePIN AI data sets. So we can see what their needs were. Many of them, even though they were in DePIN, they still primarily were operating on cost, total costs, so storage and egress. And so I drilled down more and said, well, what's really your need? Does the fact that we're decentralized make a big difference? The fact that we can pay crypto, and none of those really landed, and it kept coming back to cost. So then it was, okay, you're a startup. What's your estimate right now of the growth? What are the unit economics of, as you get more customers, how much more data will you have? And so I started to gain conviction around, okay, that seems reasonable. 500, those headsets that provide such and such a data. And so that kind of helped me think, okay, I think we could maybe land here, 2026, if we got not just one, but we got three. And then the go-to-market was, well, that's a referral, but it's direct. So they had relationships. They felt there might be, if they set the example, others could come on. And so that's kind of how I reasoned through for 2026, how can we land this and convert these? And then they shared upside of, but if this takes off, then it'll be 10x that in the future. So I factor that in sort of the back of my head, but I'm still trying to stay focused on how can we act in 2026 with what we have and how do we land those. How to acquire the customers. So in the earlier conversation, Juan shared, there's different ways that you access customers. And so that's a thing that we keep in mind as part of the user journey. There's some that are direct selling, and so that might be a developer acquisition, or it might be just sort of more of this sales outbound. There's sell with. There's somebody else that also targets the same market, and that we partner to them, and we go into those markets together, either as a reference or as a shared stack. And then there are sell-throughs. So for example, in that use case with the dealer broker, we could go direct, or there is an ISV named Record, which says, well, we already have those customers and those conversations, so I'm talking with them again next week. Can we be the mechanism that's in the back end that gives them these properties that they and their customers want, and they engage with them? And so there are other examples where they already have a customer relationship, but we have properties that their customers want and that we want. And so that's the go-to-market factor in terms of how quickly can we acquire them, what's the product that we need to build, what's our focus that we need to do in terms of defining who we're going after. So now these are some pitches, these are the hypotheses in a table for us to kind of like lay out more simply. Okay, this is how we lined it up. Here's what the market is. Here's an advantage. Here might be the go-to-market considerations. These are some risks that we have of if we pursue those. And so a goal would be to add that information. And if you, in watching this, are like, I have a better sense of a particular market, you can either propose one, or in reviewing these, say, you know what, of those, I think this one is the one that I'm excited about. I can help participate in building, marketing, or selling. So the goal is to like either get more conviction with data around the ones that were proposed, or if you have an instinct on this is something that's interesting, I want to, or I already know about this customer set, to start sharing amongst everyone. And so that's going to be the exercise here. It's in the doc to either vote on something or suggest something, and the goal is like let's work together to find it. And so my closing thoughts on it is, you'll see getting the real data only really comes from talking to customers. So there's a little bit of art with science. So I had to research what's the number, their databases, I can estimate the size, how do I size it, and then acting, which is just we want to get to a place where we can start to act when we have this information. So we're going to gather information together, gain conviction, and then be able to act on it. And it may not mean right away building. It may mean a team says, I know the set of customers, they're adjacent to something that I already do. I'm going to go talk to them. I'm going to bring this in. I use 2026 revenue. It's very different from an analyst style projection, which you may get from a Google Chat GPT, which will be many of these always have in the hundreds of millions or billions, but really trying to find how are we actionable to book the revenue in 2026. And then think about, where can you best fit, and what's the team that you would like to be a part of. It could be the team that you're at a table with. It could be a team that's existing that says we have a conviction on the DePIN AI market. And then to think about what are the foundations for those markets, which we did an analysis of those that, well, we need to make sure that something that's durable and repairable for us to be credible as a shared foundation for those. But there might be differentiators that we propose that are also shared. So one hypothesis was being able to show location, because data sovereignty might be the hypothesis that we want to go for. So what I'm going to propose next is you're all in a sort of groups and tables. Pick and vote on amongst you which ones would you want to pick if you had to pick, or if there's something that you're like, oh, he's missing this, I have an insight into this, we should really explore this, here's the reason why, and work on your table to try to say, okay, can we land on something together? And so if you open your doc, I listed those same options up here that I showed here, and just share how do you want to get on this and make it actionable from the group, and then share that. It could be, I know what they need, and we need to do these things. Or I have this insight and we should do something else. Or I want to provide more information on a given market. All right, are there any questions before you guys go into your pods or groups where you are? Or, yeah.
So, do you want people to do more market stuff on Web3, on DeFi or Web3 video, separate from kind of the work that FOC has already done? Do you want them to try and add more to those market descriptions, or would you actually really prefer people are branching out to new markets, and is the aim that they fill out this table, or they fill out the questions of who are the customers, what are examples, what problems do they want solved, kind of more of the market definition table?
Yeah. So I put both of those here. My ideal preference is, because you're familiar with a market or a segment, or you've been working either with customers or the technology, to share, hey, I've got some new ideas that we didn't surface together. Or it is valuable for me if somebody looks at this and says, the ones that I proposed and said, I really do actually like this. I think there's ways that I can contribute, whether as a builder or a marketer or somebody who wants to build on top of Filecoin on-chain cloud. I'm open to both. These are hypotheses that we're I think these make sense, but some people may be but I think there's something else. And I want to hear ideas that you can kind of reason through together. Is that clear? But if you're I don't have any ideas, then I would like to know, well, but this one seems really interesting, and I would vote that we would all align on that, because our goal is to align.
Would you want people who have ideas to popcorn them, and then people can join them if they're excited to talk about that idea? Or do you just want people to debate in there too? Okay. Okay.
If everybody aligns that this one's really great, and then share how would you want to do it, what would be the open questions, what are the additional data. If you're in the group and someone says, but I think we should do this, discuss it and try to hash out oh, this is a good idea, or surface what are the concerns. And then every table will share, this is the one that I like, this is the one I want to pursue, this is new, this sounds good, let's go for it. So everyone should be able to share a market that's either one that was proposed as a hypothesis, or I've got something new. I've got something that nobody, it wasn't brought up. All right, time's up. I'm going to go around counterclockwise. Counterclockwise. I'm going to talk with that team on the side. And so it's pick the market. The questions to share, pick a market. Why'd you pick it? What's the differentiator? How would you want to attack that market? And just go. So I think, Ian, you're up for your table.
I took notes on this wonderful
awesome.
cardboard.
That's great.
We mostly talked about infrastructure backups, actually. So John built a container registry that runs on top of FWS, or FOC. And so we talked a lot about the infrastructure market in general. So artifact storage, the existing players are Artifactory, Docker, Image Vault, ECR. Every cloud provider has their own local infrastructure provider service.
Right.
From a requirements perspective, immutability and verifiable content, especially after the SolarWinds attack, people really care about getting immutable copies of their packages. To make sure that they're actually using the right thing. Okay. It can potentially be cheaper for widely used redundant artifacts. So if everybody's using the same image of Nginx, your company has to pay less to store it because that cost can be spread across multiple providers. And we talked about...
How would you go after them? How would you pursue these?
Yeah. More robust. Oh, how we would go after it. We didn't talk a lot about how we would go after it. But I think from my experience, we would probably need to launch some so container registries in particular are mostly, there's a local copy usually running inside every Kubernetes cluster or other infrastructure cluster. Okay. And so if you have an adapter that you can deploy into a Kubernetes cluster that will load images from Filecoin web services into the like local cache in like an automatic way. I think that's the easiest way to like get more adoption in this market, and then you just have to go after like people who potentially want to use that in their clusters. I think you could go to KubeCon, you could go to all of these like infrastructure places and say, hey, you know, we have this new system. It's as easy to use as Artifactory and the other systems you already use, and it's all backed up to this decentralized network and probably costs you less.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Make sure you put that in the Google Doc so I can look at it next. Okay, next.
Hello, I also have a food box, but I didn't write anything on it, but I feel like this is the trend.
Okay. Good.
We decided to work on Web3 video for a litany of reasons. One, for the decentralized world, ingest a video is actually quite an onerous experience for a lot of people to ingest in one spot and then distribute it to wherever your AI training models are. So in many upload solutions, if you had distributed SPs, it'd be a very, very good solution for that. In addition to that, too, the idea of immutability and data governance fits a lot of models and use cases, especially in the video surveillance world. Chain of custody is very important. And cloud providers worked in the past. It was very important, every single step of the way have proper chain of custody when it comes to trials, because if there's any single gap in that, there can be a way to throw out a case. So it's very, very important for that. In addition to we touched upon too about the idea of having the data not in one of the big hyperscale cloud providers. Do you really want Amazon training, potentially training on your video models? Now, you probably want to keep it more local, close to the chest. So the way we would target this really is to identify the feature functionality that are still missing for the average use case, whether it is someone that's a little bit far removed from Web3 that wants to integrate into there. What are the gaps there to resolve that, and then focus on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Make sure it's in the doc. Okay, the next one.
So we spent most of our time discussing what kind of market we could go after, so didn't quite discuss their other questions. But one of the ideas that came up is that we have all of the electric vehicles that collect data and so on, that could then be also, so the market is either electric vehicle producers and kind of all the tooling that or software that runs there, or the insurance market for those vehicles, because the vehicles are now able to collect a lot of the data, and the insurance market is actually the one that would go after or like would appreciate it. We did not do a really great job at thinking about the estimation of the size and so on and so forth, but clearly the idea there would be availability of highly reliable data that can't be muted, is immutable, and the examples here would be driver data in terms of like car crashes, where you can verify what happened before the crash, and so on and so forth. What was the state of the car, and how was the driver driving? What Filecoin advantages might win? I think it is data that wouldn't necessarily need to be retrieved highly constantly, right? But it is the data that has to be very available and durable, which is something that Filecoin provides. Obviously, the immutability. And so on and so forth. Numbers of customers, we have no idea. Storage per customer, we assume not very much actually, but it's a huge amount of cars, right? So that's it. And then, the price points or anything like that, not. The only other thing is that either we could go after the car manufacturers and sell it to them and through them to the insurance companies, because that is kind of easier. It doesn't require probably as much of regulatory changes that are a problem in the insurance industry, or we could sell directly to the insurance companies and through them to the market, to the car providers, depending on which angle do we want to take.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right.
I think Beanbag's next. We talked about 3 markets and we couldn't pick one. So our 3 were one, Web2 apps databases, turning the current Filecoin on-chain cloud interfaces into kind of an S3 bucket interface, and generally targeting the users of general Web2 databases, kind of like people who might be using OrbitDB today. The next one was a much larger volume market with lower access, which is the kind of like large-scale CCTV camera data, so like surveillance video, whatever that's called, but you know what I'm talking about. And that has like large archival needs, but maybe also the need to run interesting AI and training jobs over that data, or pruning jobs, which could be very interesting. Also has benefits around provenance of knowing when this and where this data was collected, and being able to kind of have it versioned and time-stamped. Last one was storing intermediate compute snapshots. So you could have kind of like, whole, maybe a little bit more similar to Ian's example from an infra perspective, but like kind of these intermediary jobs, you can query by content addressing to see if there's already kind of like a job according to that, and then you don't have to rerun the compute. You can just kind of grab the results and go to the next step of that compute. And so those are the three we were excited about. I would say the middle one has like a nice sweet spot of like scale versus how many providers you'd have to work with, which is nice. But we'd have to go and investigate that market and understand what storage solutions they're using today, what their price point is, and kind of the new benefits that whether they would find kind of versioning, timestamping, provenance, and immutability really exciting.
Okay, great. Yes.
Thank you. So we were talking about two as well. They're kind of related. The first one is data sovereignty, and the second one is DePIN. And I think from the European perspective, there are currently, with the current geopolitical situation, there is a lot of grants that currently European Union starts doing around services built within Europe, and we're even participating in some of them. I think providing storage is a pretty important point for all those services. Unfortunately, Europe don't have this huge conglomerate enterprise corporation that can enable it for the just regular developers. It means that now it goes to the shoulders of the European Union and the Tech Commission around the European Union to provide the necessary resources to build those things. And instead of building something that is, I don't know, centralized and completely siloed behind the one particular enterprise, it would be nice for the storage itself to be decentralized. And the same goes for the DePIN infrastructure for AI or for not AI. I think AI giving pretty, with the amount of data it needs to store, giving pretty compelling case. But nonetheless, the ways how the European data centers spread around the whole continent gives a lot of opportunity to go basically bare metal and try to establish something that will not be affected by US East 1 disaster that we had several weeks ago. So from this perspective, I think those two would be something that we preferred, and maybe partially we already doing it, but not from the storage perspective, rather from like ZK and some other things. So taking storage would be a nice addition to these activities.
Yes. So we discussed one use case particularly, and then I added another one that I'm passionate about. So the first one is the DePIN use case, and it's getting a lot of momentum lately. It has a growing opportunities and a lot of attention, and attracting a lot of teams right now that we see. It's easy for us to engage with. It's part of a broader infrastructure need. So the alignment between the need for a DePIN application that require both storage and compute can really align us with the ecosystem and the community, and really enable broad type of use cases. The second one is more, at least I was more passionate about, which is the AI data sets. In general, not specifically just DePIN, but just AI in general. AI use case rely on large data sets. That's just how machine learning works. You need a lot of data, which is very relevant and important for us. The second thing is verifiability is also inherent need when you talk about AI and machine learning application. All the regulated industries require verifiability of data from organizations in the health, insurance, finance industries, because they have to show how models were trained. And that's been going on for dozens of years. There's nothing new here. So they have to show how data is being verified and what was used to train the models. And this is very aligned with Filecoin. And another angle is that AI is just very hot right now. So it can help us attract new use cases. It's a growing space. We don't have to compete with legacy providers. And it can help us attract also talent, because AI is sexy and everybody wants to be in it. So that's very important.
Thank you, everyone. This is great. We'll be talking soon.
We just talked about a lot of markets, and these are all nascent ideas, which is great. It's great to like pull the wisdom of the crowds to grab a number of ideas for us to go dive into deeper. This is the level of kind of assessment of that we should get to. A key part of that is comparing these different market verticals against each other and looking at the different requirements, the different scale of business opportunity. Really, at the end of the day, your question is, what is the ROI of going into that market? What do we have to build as an ecosystem in order to win that sub-market, and what is the demand that they have for the services and the revenue that they will bring into this ecosystem collectively. And that can then guide our prioritization, but that involves looking more deeply at like, what's the scale of data? What is the sort of integrations that would need to be done? What are the relationships that we can pull on for existing partners and businesses in order to go to market in that vertical? And then on the flip side, like what sort of data volume at what data price point with what sort of integrations can they bring into the ecosystem? How much would we have to share that revenue, say, with other businesses or submarkets? But my nudge for folks, especially, I think a lot of the product folks just went out to do a DePIN deep dive, but you know, kind of like want to guide us to be thinking about our market analysis from this sort of more data-driven assessment. So thank you for all of your great ideas, because we will now pull that into this level of analysis that we can make decisions based on.